A black man in a sharp suit gets pulled over on a quiet street. The officer leans in, smirking. Nice car. Doesn't look like it belongs to someone like you. What starts as a routine stop quickly spirals into blatant racism and abuse of power. The officer mocks, humiliates, and assumes he's in control. But what he doesn't know is that the man he's targeting isn't just any driver. He's the head of internal affairs. And in a matter of minutes, the tables are about to turn in the most shocking way possible. Pull over. The command sliced through the quiet suburban street like a knife. Marcus, a well-dressed black man in his 40s, calmly steered his luxury sedan to the curb. He had just finished a long day at the office, loosened his tie, and was enjoying the cool evening breeze through a cracked window. But in an instant, the peace of his drive home had been shattered. His mind stayed steady. This wasn't the first time he'd been pulled over, but there was something about the officer's tone, harsh, almost eager, that made him brace himself for what was coming. The officer emerged from his patrol car, tall, broad-shouldered, with a rigid stance. He approached Marcus's vehicle with a scowl fixed on his face. His right hand rested on his holster, as if danger lurked in the driver's seat. Though Marcus had done nothing more than obey a traffic command, he leaned down to the window. His voice was sharp, commanding. License and registration. And don't make any sudden moves. Marcus raised his hand slightly, palms open, his tone calm and respectful. Of course, officer. May I ask why I'm being stopped? The cop gave a short, mocking laugh and shook his head. Don't play smart with me. A nice car like this doesn't usually belong in this neighborhood. So what are you doing here? The words dripped with suspicion, each one carrying the weight of an assumption. Marcus kept his expression steady, though his chest tightened. He had worked his entire life to get where he was, to earn the success reflected in the car he drove, the suit he wore, and the quiet confidence he carried. Yet here he was, reduced to a stereotype in the officer's eyes. Officer, Marcus said carefully, I'm driving home. That's all. But the cop wasn't interested in explanations. He straightened up, squinting at Marcus as if studying him under a microscope. You know, the officer continued, smirking, I've seen this before. Guys like you, dressed up nice, acting like you belong. Probably some hustler, or maybe you borrowed the car from your boss. Am I getting warm? Marcus stayed still, his grip tight on the steering wheel, though his voice never wavered. No, officer, you're not. The officer chuckled again, shaking his head with exaggerated disbelief. You people always have a story, don't you? Always some excuse. A couple walking their dog slowed on the sidewalk, watching the scene unfold. From their expressions, they could feel the tension in the air, too. The flashing lights painted the houses red and blue, turning an ordinary suburban evening into a stage for something ugly. Marcus sighed softly, his patience wearing thin. He knew this wasn't just about a traffic stop. It was about something deeper. But he also knew losing his temper would only fuel the fire. I suggest you think carefully about your words, officer, Marcus said quietly, his eyes never leaving the man's. The cop leaned closer, his smirk turning sharper. What are you going to do? Call a lawyer? Maybe cry about it later? Save it. Tonight, you're not going anywhere until I'm done with you. Inside the car, Marcus felt the weight of years of injustice pressing against him. But unlike the officer, he carried himself with discipline. His silence wasn't weakness. It was control, license, registration. Now, the officer repeated, snapping his fingers impatiently. Marcus reached slowly toward the glove compartment, narrating each move so there could be no misunderstanding. He handed over his papers, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the officer's aggression. The cop glanced at the documents, then frowned. This address doesn't make sense. This neighborhood isn't for you. Step out of the car. The demand was louder now, carrying arrogance and threat. The couple walking their dog exchanged worried looks but stayed back, uncertain if they should intervene. Marcus opened the door and stepped out slowly. His tie shifted in the breeze, his polished shoes tapping softly on the pavement. He stood tall, shoulders squared, refusing to shrink under the weight of the officer's prejudice. The officer circled him, eyeing him like a predator sizing up prey. You think dressing sharp makes you special? Let me tell you something. You're just another guy trying to act above the law. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he remained unshaken. He looked the officer straight in the eyes and said calmly, "Above the law? No, I live by the law. And soon, officer, you'll realize exactly who you're dealing with." The words carried quiet power. The crowd watching this scene, both the neighbors on the sidewalk and, eventually, the YouTube audience would feel it. The tension was at its peak. The stage set for a revelation that would turn the entire encounter upside down. The officer scoffed, still unaware of the storm about to break. Marcus opened his glove compartment slowly, his every movement deliberate. The officer's eyes narrowed as he leaned closer to the window, his tone thick with arrogance. "You know," the cop sneered, his lip curling, "I've seen this before. Guys like you, dressed up, driving cars you don't own, pretending you belong here. Probably some kind of hustler or scam artist. Am I right?" Marcus looked at him steadily, his expression calm but unyielding. "No, officer, you're not right." But the officer wasn't interested in the truth. He shook his head with exaggerated disbelief, scanning Marcus from head to toe as if his very presence was a crime. "You people always have an excuse. Always a story. Where's the real owner of this car? Huh? Or did you just borrow it for the night?" The words cut deep, not because Marcus hadn't heard them before, but because they revealed exactly what this stop was about. This wasn't about traffic or safety or law. This was about prejudice. Still, Marcus didn't flinch. He held the officer's gaze, his voice low and steady. "Officer, I suggest you think carefully about what you're saying. Every word matters." The cop let out a mocking laugh, stepping back slightly, puffing his chest with false authority. "What are you going to do? Call a lawyer? Cry foul? Maybe play the victim card? Good luck with that. Out here, you're just another guy behind the wheel." The audience watching this on YouTube would be boiling with frustration. They could feel the imbalance, the officer towering with arrogance, and Marcus responding with nothing but calm control. It was the perfect storm of tension. Marcus exhaled slowly, his patience holding like steel. "I'm not here to play any cards," he said evenly. "I'm here because you pulled me over without cause. That's the only truth we're dealing with right now." The officer leaned in closer, his shadow stretching across Marcus's seat. His eyes glinted with hostility. "Truth," he scoffed. "The truth is, I don't need a reason. I can stop anyone I want, anytime I want. And tonight, that's you. You got that?" Marcus tilted his head, studying the man in silence for a moment. The quiet was louder than any argument. Finally, he spoke. "Is that what you think law enforcement is about? Power without accountability?" The officer stiffened, clearly not expecting such a composed response. "Watch your tone," he snapped. "You're walking a thin line." Outside, a few more neighbors had stopped to watch. The flashing red and blue lights reflected in their windows, painting the street like a stage. Some whispered each other, uneasy, sensing the officer was going too far. Inside the car, Marcus remained composed, his hands resting loosely on the steering wheel. His calmness wasn't submission. It was control, a control the officer clearly didn't understand. The cop smirked again, trying to reassert his dominance. "Step out of the car," he ordered, tapping the door with his flashlight. "Let's see how tough you are when you're not hiding behind a steering wheel." Marcus's jaw tightened, but his movements remained measured. He unlocked the door and stepped out slowly, straightening his suit jacket as he did. His height nearly matched the officer's, and his quiet confidence immediately shifted the air around them. Standing face to face, the officer tried one last jab. "You think dressing sharp makes you different? Makes you better? At the end of the day, you're no one special. Just another guy I stopped on the road." Marcus looked at him calmly, his voice steady as stone. "You're wrong again, officer. Very wrong. And before this night is over, you'll find out exactly how wrong you are." The officer blinked, caught off guard by the certainty in Marcus's words. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed his face. The audience would feel it too, the shift in tone, the quiet storm brewing beneath Marcus's patience. Something big was about to happen. The tables were about to turn. And the officer, still smirking, had no idea that the man he mocked so casually was holding a power that could change his entire career in a single moment. The tension hung heavy in the night air, every second dragging like thunder before a strike of lightning. Something was coming, and when it hit, it would shock the entire street. Marcus handed over his license, his movements slow, deliberate, almost rehearsed. He knew every motion mattered, and he wasn't about to give the officer even the slightest excuse to twist the situation. The officer glanced at the license, then frowned as his eyes darted back to Marcus. His lips curled in suspicion. "This address, this neighborhood, doesn't match up with someone like you," he muttered, as if simply existing here was a crime. He stepped back and barked louder. "Step out of the car." The command echoed down the quiet street. A couple walking their golden retriever slowed, glancing nervously at the scene. The flashing red and blue lights from the squad car painted their faces in sharp strokes of color. They could sense the hostility in the air, the kind of tension that makes you hold your breath and hope it doesn't explode. Marcus opened the door and stepped out slowly. He smoothed his tie with one hand, adjusting it neatly, as if this were just another meeting, another confrontation he had been preparing for. He stood tall, his presence calm but unshakable, a stark contrast to the officer's restless aggression. "Hands where I can see them." The officer snapped, his voice sharp, as if daring Marcus to disobey. His flashlight beam swept across Marcus's chest and face, emphasizing every detail: the neat suit, the polished shoes, the steady gaze. The officer scoffed. "You think dressing sharp makes you special? Makes you untouchable? Newsflash, you're just another guy trying to act above the law." Marcus tilted his head slightly, the corner of his mouth twitching, as though the insult amused him more than it angered him. His voice was calm, deliberate, almost too calm for the situation. "Above the law? No, officer. I am the law. You'll understand soon enough." The officer barked out a laugh, rolling his eyes dramatically. "Yeah, sure. Save the speeches for someone who cares. Out here, your tie doesn't mean anything. Your car doesn't mean anything. All that matters is what I say." The words hung heavy in the night air, dripping with arrogance. The dog-walking couple exchanged a glance, their faces tight with concern. Even from across the street, they could feel the imbalance of power, the way the officer flexes authority like a weapon. Marcus, however, remained unshaken. His voice never rose, his hands never trembled. Instead, he clasped them neatly in front of him, standing like a man in complete control of the storm. "You've made a lot of assumptions tonight," he said evenly. "Assumptions about me, about who I am, about what I stand for." The officer rolled his eyes again, waving a dismissive hand. "Don't give me that. I've been on the force 10 years. I can spot trouble a mile away." Marcus's expression didn't change, but his silence carried weight. He simply let the officer's words hang in the air, as if waiting for him to bury himself deeper. The pause grew uncomfortable, and for the first time, the officer's confident smirk faltered just a little. To break the silence, the officer stepped closer, invading Marcus's space, his voice dropping to a mocking growl. "Let me guess, you're some hotshot businessman, right? Think money makes you bulletproof? Out here, none of that matters. Out here, you answer to me." Marcus leaned forward slightly, his voice quiet but cutting, the kind of tone that silences a room. "No, officer. Out here, I answer only to the law. And the law is bigger than you." The officer blinked, caught off guard by the certainty in Marcus's words. For a split second, doubt flickered in his eyes, but just as quickly, arrogance returned, shielding him like armor. "You think you can scare me with words?" he sneered. "You're wasting your breath." Marcus straightened his tie again, a subtle gesture, but one that carried the confidence of a man who knew exactly where this was heading. His eyes locked onto the officer's, unwavering. "I don't need to scare you," he said quietly. "The truth will do that on its own." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Even the couple across the street seemed frozen, waiting for the next move. The officer shifted uncomfortably, his bravado beginning to crack. "Yeah, we'll see about that," he muttered, though his tone had lost a fraction of its bite. And just like that, the stage was set. The officer still believed he held all the power. He still thought Marcus was just another man he could intimidate, another box to check off his nightly patrol. But Marcus knew better. He knew the moment of truth was seconds away, the quiet reveal that would flip the balance of power entirely. The tension was no longer just building. It was about to break. The officer's hand twitched impatiently on his holster. "Your ID," he demanded again, his tone sharper, angrier, as though volume alone could mask his unease. "Now." Marcus said nothing at first. Instead, he moved with deliberate calm, sliding one hand inside his suit jacket. Every eye in the street was fixed on him. The officer's posture stiffened, his hand gripping his weapon, ready for the slightest wrong move. But when Marcus's hand emerged, it wasn't holding just a driver's license. It was holding a badge. He lifted it high enough for the streetlights to catch the polished metal, letting its shine cut through the night. His voice, steady but commanding, broke the silence. "Special Agent Marcus Carter," he declared, his tone firm enough to shake the officer's confidence. "Head of Internal Affairs." For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. The red and blue lights flashed across Marcus's face, reflecting in the officer's widening eyes. The words sank in slowly, almost painfully. Internal Affairs, the one division every cop feared, the watchdog that investigated corruption, misconduct, and abuses of power. The officer's arrogant smirk shattered instantly. His jaw slackened. His grip on his holster loosened. Panic flickered across his face like a storm cloud. Marcus didn't flinch. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them until the officer had no choice but to meet his gaze. His voice carried the weight of authority, each syllable striking like a hammer. "I've been investigating reports of racial profiling in this department," Marcus said coldly. "And tonight, officer, you made my job very easy." The couple with the dog gasped audibly. The entire street seemed to hold its breath. Every sound, the hum of the cruiser, the rustle of leaves, the faint barking in the distance, faded under the tension of that moment. The officer stammered, his words tripping over themselves. Wait, I didn't mean..." But Marcus cut him off with a raised hand. His eyes narrowed, sharp as steel. "Every word you said, every action you took, has been recorded. You assumed I didn't belong because of the color of my skin. You mocked me, belittled me, and abused your badge. And now..." He paused, letting the weight of his words press down like a gavel. "Now there will be consequences." The officer's shoulders slumped as his bravado crumbled. His earlier arrogance had vanished, replaced by raw fear. His lips quivered as he tried to salvage what dignity he could. "Agent Carter, I was just doing my job." "Your job?" Marcus's voice thundered in the night. "Your job is to protect and serve, not to harass and humiliate, not to weaponize prejudice against innocent people. You failed that duty the moment you pulled me over without cause." The dog-walking couple exchanged looks of awe. They had witnessed the ugly face of abuse of power, and now they were witnessing justice unfold right before their eyes. Marcus lowered the badge slightly but kept his eyes locked on the officer. His calm demeanor never cracked. "You thought you were in control tonight," he continued. "But power built on arrogance and hate always collapses. And tonight, it collapsed right in front of you." The officer swallowed hard, unable to form a response. His silence spoke louder than words. Marcus leaned in just slightly, his final words deliberate, like a verdict delivered in court. "Your actions will be reviewed. Your career, your reputation, your future. They're all now part of my case file. You expose yourself, and there's no undoing it." The weight of that statement hung heavy in the air. The officer looked down, shame and fear etched across his face. Meanwhile, Marcus slipped his badge back into his jacket, straightened his tie, and walked toward his car with the quiet confidence of a man who didn't need to shout to be heard. He had already spoken volumes. For the YouTube audience, this was a payoff, the moment of justice, the role reversal they'd been waiting for. The arrogant officer was stripped of his false authority, while Marcus, calm and composed, revealed himself as the true figure of power. The message was clear, timeless, and unforgettable. Sometimes the strongest weapon isn't rage or force. It's the truth carried by the right person at the right time. Within minutes, another set of flashing lights painted the quiet street. A second patrol car rolled up, but this time the atmosphere shifted entirely. The neighbors who had been holding their breath watched anxiously as a sergeant stepped out. Unlike the first officer, his posture was calm, professional, and firm. Marcus, still standing tall beside his car, raised his badge with quiet authority. Agent Marcus Carter. He introduced himself again, his tone steady. Head of Internal Affairs. The sergeant's eyes widened briefly with recognition, then narrowed at the scene before him. It didn't take long for Marcus to explain. He laid out the chain of events, his words measured and precise, leaving no room for doubt. The arrogance, the profiling, the disrespect, it was all accounted for. The sergeant turned toward the officer who had started it all. Gone was the smirk. Gone was the swagger. The man who once barked orders now stood trembling, his face pale under the harsh glow of the cruiser's headlights. "Turn around," the sergeant ordered coldly. The officer stammered, "Sarge, wait. I didn't mean..." But there was no waiting, no excuses. His wrists were pulled behind his back, the metallic click of handcuffs echoing through the night like poetic justice. The very sound that had haunted so many innocent people now bound the hands of the guilty. The neighbors, who had been glued to their porches and sidewalks, erupted into quiet claps. It wasn't loud or rowdy. It was restrained, respectful, almost reverent. They weren't cheering for Marcus alone. They were applauding justice itself, justice they rarely saw served so swiftly and so clearly. Marcus walked toward his car, his steps unhurried, his composure intact. But before sliding into the driver's seat, he paused. He turned back to face the disgraced officer, whose head now hung low, eyes darting in panic. Marcus's voice was calm, but it cut through the air like a blade. This is why Internal Affairs exists. To remind people like you that no one is above the law, not even those who wear the badge. The officer's lips parted as if to respond, but no words came. He had none left to give. His authority was stripped, his career hanging by a thread, his pride shattered in front of the very community he had sworn to serve. Marcus didn't linger for his reaction. He opened his car door, adjusted his jacket, and slid into the driver's seat with the poise of a man who knew his job was far from done. He had exposed one officer tonight, but his mission, the mission of integrity, accountability, and justice, was larger than one case. The engine roared softly to life. Marcus glanced once more in the rear-view mirror, watching the scene unfold behind him. The officer being escorted away, the sergeant standing firm, the neighbors whispering among themselves, their faces lit with both shock and relief. As Marcus pulled away from the curb, the camera would linger on those faces, faces of community that had seen too many nights filled with fear and doubt, now witnessing accountability in action. For them, it wasn't just about one man's arrogance being punished. It was about realizing there were still champions of justice who wouldn't look away. The car disappeared down the road, taillights fading into the distance, leaving behind silence, reflection, and a powerful lesson. For the viewer,